Greetings to everyone and a kind thank you for coming to today's lecture and also joining us via Zoom. This is the opening lecture for this new month in which we host Steven Forti, professor of modern and contemporary history at the Universitat Autónoma de Barcelona, who is as well a contributor to the Arenas project and the visiting fellow to our institute. Now, just shortly, the Arenas project is bringing together a multidisciplinary consortium of 9 universities, NGOs, small and medium enterprises, and so on. It is 12 organizations from 9 countries, and it looks at extremist narratives that affect political and social life in Europe. It examines the nature of these narratives and seeks to understand the discourses they impact, particularly with regard to science, gender, and the nation. And today, we will ponder if we can consider the post-Cold War far right as a new kind of saprofagous organism. We will hear more on this term and the question itself by Steven Forti, who will focus mainly on 3 aspects of the discourse and ideology of the new far right: ideological confusionism, syncretism, ideological parasitism, semantic hijacking, and culture wars. It all sounds very exciting. Therefore, I shall now just pass the word to Steven here. Steven, thank you for coming. Also, welcome to our institute, and we're very happy to hear what you have to share with us.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. Thank you, Sasha, for the introduction. Thanks for the institute for the welcoming to being here is a pleasure. And let's talk about this issue. I try to summarize what is my idea. Now, here we start with this image that maybe is not exactly what we're supposed to talk about when we are talking about far right today. No, is an image of some years ago in Russia, in post-Soviet Russia, about the National Bolshevik Party of Limonov and Dugin. But it's interesting. I want to say it's very plastic, the image of putting together supposedly also symbols and also in the name Bolshevik, National Bolshevik Party, far right and far left. That is what's usually is called like Nazbol, no? But it is useful to try to understand what I try to mean with the metaphor of saprofagous organism, and this from a quote and an idea that I think is very interesting of George Mosse in a book of, more than 40 years ago, was published, Masses and Men, in 1980, in the English edition, where Mosse talks about, different things, but between others, he tried to define what is the fascist myth. And you can see here the quote of Mosse. No, Mosse obviously talks about the fascist myth based on patriotic mystique, revolutionary and dynamics tradition, a continuation of the experience of the First World War in peacetime, but also a myth that includes, and I'm quoting, leftovers from earlier ideologies and political attitudes, many of which run counter to fascist tradition. It was a saprofagous organism that tried to appropriate everything that had fascinated people between the 19th and the 20th centuries. Romanticism, liberalism, socialism, as well as Darwinism and modern technology. And try to have an idea of what could be a saprofagous organism, also if we are not biologists or expert in that field. I found that image, no? But I think it's interesting, this idea, first of all, to understand fascism, historical fascism in interwar times, and the discourse, the rhetoric that fascism used it also to try to gain the consensus between a part of the population. But I think could be useful also for understanding or try to understanding our contemporary far right. So first, I want also to briefly explain what I'm talking about when I use the concept of extreme right 2.0, or if you want, broadly speaking, of far right. No, we know that there is like a strong, intense debate about which concept using to define Meloni and Orban, Trump and Milei, Bolsonaro and Le Pen, etc., etc. No, so one of the most well-known concept is the one of a populist radical right. For example, coined by, between others, Casmude. It is maybe the most used in academic papers nowadays, but also in the public opinion debate. Then we have like the concept of national populism, no? Coined in the 80s, talking about the first Le Penism by Pierre-André Taguieff, and more recently, for example, used also by Roger Itwell and Matthew Goodwin in a book that was titled exactly National Populism. And then we have, for example, who between scholars use the concept of post-fascism, between others Enzo Traverso, no? In a book that the title in English of 4 or 5 years ago was New Faces of Fascism. So first of all, here we have like a debate how to call these parties, movement, and leaders that, as we know, and in the last 5 years is quite visible. They have more consensus. They are leading also some countries. Secondly, I think we have a problem that is not only related to far extreme right, related to how to define things that we have right now in the world. And we usually use the concept of post in a lot of meanings, from post-Fordism to postmodernism to post-communism to post-fascism. And it's quite like, seems to be that we have no terms, no words to explain what we are living today in politics, in culture, in other fields. No? So first of all, I think this point is interesting to talk about. And then, in my opinion, these three definitions, the last one I just explained why for me is a bit maybe not so useful, because it's like post something, and we cannot have finally a real idea of what we are talking about. And the first two, I'm not comfortable for two reasons. National populism, because populism I don't think is an ideology, as someone suggests, but is like a political style or a political strategy, if you want. So nowadays, more or less everybody is populist because they appeal to the people, they use a rhetoric or some strategy related to what we usually call populism. So to talk about national populism don't explain nothing about the leaders we are talking about, no, and this movement. And the concept of radical right, I think, is not, I'm not comfortable with that, because finally is not explain what really, there's a point. Radical right, according to Mosse, the radical right is democratic, but against liberal democracy. The point is that I don't think that what Mosse say that is radical right, populist radical right, they are democratic, because if you are, as Mosse also stated, against the rule of law and against the right of minority, I don't think we can consider this kind of parties and movement or leaders democratic. So radical right, I think, don't explain exactly where they are in the axis left or right, no? So may I prefer, with maybe a bit of provocation, if you want, and irony, to talk about extreme right 2.0. Why? First, extreme right, as also Pier Ignazzi just explained, when in the 80s, 90s, he explained the difference between a traditional extreme right, so neo-fascist party tout court, 100%, and he used the concept of post-industrial extreme right, so a new kind of extreme right, founded around the 70s or beginning of the 80s, related to the change of society after the end of Keynesianism and the shift to a post-Fordist society. May I use extreme right, for one hand, to understand that we are talking about no democratic parties and movement. So we should put them in the extreme right, in the axis left and right. And the 2.0 want to explain that we are now in front of something that is not exactly the fascism of 1 century ago. So it's something new. In some point, there is like connection, there is continuities too, but it's not exactly the same. So if we use as scholars the glasses of fascism, is difficult to understand this kind of party, their goal, their rhetoric, their discourses, their program. And then the 2.0 also want to point out the importance of the new technology in the spread of their ideas, their discourse. They understand better and before other parties and movement how new technologies, internet, social network, etc., are useful to spread their ideas, and so to convert their ideas in mainstream. That is what we are seeing today, more or less everywhere. And then I think is important also because to use like a macro category or a concept that is quite broader, as this one of extreme right, or new extreme right, or extreme right 2.0, if you prefer, that is related to understand them like as a big global family. I want to say there's a big debate, for example, if Javier Milei is the same of Giorgia Meloni, or if Viktor Orban is the same of Bolsonaro. And a lot of people say, and they are also right, that is not exactly the same, because they have also some divergences, some differences in their program, in their statement, etc., etc. But I think that finally, if we take a look at their program or the manifesto of the party, or what they are done when they do when they are in the government, we have some common ideological references that they share. They share also political and communicative strategies. One of them is the culture wars, that is related also more of the topic that I want to touch more later today. And then that they share the same networks. If we take a look of different think tanks, foundation, organization, most of these leaders, also they are from conservative and reformist in Europe, or Patriots for Europe, and in the States, the Trumpist GOP nowadays, or in Latin America, all of them, they share the same kind of networks, and they feel to be part of the same family. I want to say when Trump, in Washington 2 weeks ago, Abascal, Meloni, the son of Bolsonaro, Javier Milei, they were there. Eric Zemmour, for example. When Milei took the presidency in Argentina more than 1 year ago, most of these leaders, including Orban, they traveled to Buenos Aires, and they feel part of the same family. So I think that is important to understand that we could have divergences, that they are related, obviously, as in interwar years when we are talking about the debate, what is fascism? And if one regime or one party is exactly fascist, para-fascist, authoritarian nationalist, that the differences and divergences are related to the political culture, the political context of each country. But then we have something that is more important, that is in common, and I think is useful to have like broad categories to try to understand what is going on. Okay, saying that, and then I know that this could open like a big debate, but later we can enter more in detail. There's something that is interesting related to this new kind of extreme right. That is the non-conformism, the provocation, the transgressivism that they use, the perception by them, or the perception that they wanted to communicate to be a rebel. Rebels against the system. And it's not only, for example, Elon Musk and the mainstreamization of the Nazi gesture that we saw some days ago in United States, but he's also thinking about the meme culture, the memization of politics. Trump in 2016 presidential election presented by the alt-right as Pepe the Frog, or, for example, to have leaders that seems to be like rock star, as Javier Milei, as you can see in the photo up there, or influencer related to Trumpism, as 8 years ago, as Milo Yiannopoulos, that is gay, that he seems to be like a village people singer. But we know that nowadays village people, they play for Trump. But in any case, 8 years ago, they don't want that Trump use their songs. But I want to say, it's like something that when we think about neo-fascism, neo-Nazi, extreme right, is not exactly the kind of, political leaders or communication or statement or, presentation that we usually think of, no? And so with a Spanish historian that is Francisco Veiga, in one book published 6 years ago, more or less, now 5-6 years ago, we dedicated a chapter about this idea of the reverse of 1968. That is also, if you want, a provocation. In which sense? So if in the 60s or the 70s, in the long 68, was the left wing, in a broader sense, that was like presenting themselves as rebel, as against the system, non-conformist, no, an alternative left. Nowadays, we have some sectors, not everybody, obviously, in the far extreme right that they believe to be rebels, and they present themselves as non-conformist, transgressive, also rebels, and that they are fighting for freedom and democracy too, and this is something that I go back later, and against the system, no, the caste, the elite, whatever. And this is related, for example, to some of this idea. No, here you have, for example, a poster of Vox in Spain, where they talk about the progressist dictatorship. So the progressist dictatorship is nowadays Spain, and not only because there is a left-wing government, and is related to the idea that we are living in like a dictatorship also in the States, related to wokeism, for example, woke culture or cultural Marxism. No? And this quite clear. You see also here a tweet of Santiago Abascal, the leader of Vox and nowadays president of Patriots for Europe, that is talking about exactly that. No, he condemned the progress dictatorship. No, or this is related obviously to the defense of freedom and the capacity, the ability that this party have to appropriate the concept of freedom that is not more related to equality. And nowadays freedom, the party of Milei is here, sorry, la libertad avanza, no? The freedom go forward or something like that. And his more important and famous slogan that he shouts every time and every day is Viva la libertad, carajo. Long life to freedom and something else. And also in the case of Brazil, no, we have the use not only to defend freedom related, for example, this is of the next October when the Supreme Court of Brazil blocked X Twitter during some weeks. Finally, people, Bolsonaris, that thanks Elon Musk in the street for defending our freedom, or against the STF, that is the federal Supreme Court in Brazil, Bolsonaris that they are in demonstration talking about a dictatorship, no, only to applying the rule and the law. Or also in the case of Meloni, usually presented as more moderate, and I don't think at all she is more moderate. She's only a bit more smart, if you want, or pragmatic, talking about the censorship. This is related, this post to social networks, but is something that she repeats, usually about wokeism and a so-called dictatorship of the left and liberals. But then, if we go, for example, in an interesting case that it is the Argentinian one, we can see how some influencer very close to Milei, as for we can say new extreme right thinkers and influencer as Agustin Laje or Álvaro Zicarelli, they saying that nowadays revolution is on the right. The revolutionary are the right, the left is conservative, no? So you can see here, is in Spanish, some quote, but also a couple of books of these two influencers. Laje wrote this book that was quite a bestseller, he had 3 books that sell a lot of copy, really, thousands of copy. That is The Cultural Fight. And this is interesting because now I'm going to talk to that because it's linked also to the mainstreamization of the extreme right and the ideological parasitism. And also in the case of Ficarelli, he talks about a political battle, it's here, sorry, and how to fight against and defeat the neo-progressism, he say, no? This is linked to the cultural battle, to the fight for a cultural hegemony. And here the point is that we should go back to the 60s and the 70s, because it's that in that time that starting in France and with the Nouvelle Droite, the New Right, the French New Right, and the figure mostly of Alain de Benoist, a neo-fascist activist and intellectual, when neo-fascist sectors try to change their strategy. And so Alain de Benoist, when in January 68, he founded in Nice a group of research, Greffe, that was like the most important group inside what at the end of the 70s, a newspaper called The New Right, that is like a nebula, it's not a party, it's not a movement, as you know, probably. De Benoist, reading from the far right, from neo-fascism, from his position, left-wing thinkers, as between others and mostly Antonio Gramsci, understand that for neo-fascism in that time, the point is to give the cultural battle. Because to give only the political battle, so to build a party, to make politics, to present themselves to election was, well, nothing interesting if they want to win. To win, to gain power, to win in the future election, they need before to do, to give the cultural battle, to having the cultural hegemony, and so only in that point, in that moment, to give the political battle, no? So it's what usually is explained as metapolitics, no? That is working in the cultural battle, no? And the right-wing Gramscianism that is quite instrumental, finally I will say something about that, of Alain de Benoist. And so this idea that the intellectuals, and nowadays we can say also some of the influencers, as the Argentinian one that we saw before, Ficarelli or Laje, well, they are like, they understand the intellectuals and thinkers or influencers nowadays as cultural warriors. No? This is the most important, the first most important book of de Benoist, that is like a compilation of different articles he wrote during the 60s and 70s. That is, received the Goncourt Award in 1977 or 78. That is a very important award in France, and is like an anthology, a collection of right-wing thinkers of the contemporary times until the 70s. And so de Benoist start, in fact, that point of the metapolitics, putting in the public debate ideas and thinkers that in the 60s, in the 70s, usually they were not quoted, or they were like not so much present, no? And this is interesting because if we follow de Benoist, that have like a peculiar itinerary, a peculiar trajectory, mostly after the Cold War, de Benoist worked not more in this broader group of the Nouvelle Droite, but mostly alone with some collaborators, but have a lot of influence in France and outside France. He understand that the time, 1991, 1992, 1993, was the right time to trying to develop some syncretistic strategy and project. So what was the idea of de Benoist in that time? Communism was defeat, USSR was defeat, we are entering a new era. Okay, and we can be agree of that. It's quite to the reality of the end of the Cold War. But according to him in that moment, left and right make no sense as category. And so we need to find new a point in common between ideas. That finally, if you want, is a way to try to convert in something else the extreme right ideas, to present them as like a convergence between opposite, or playing with this confusion. This is a quote of one of the last book of de Benoit, The Populist Movement, Left and Right, C'est fini, It's Over. That was of 2017, so just after the first victory of Trump. And de Benoit continue with this idea, no? So right and left are labels that do not represent different ideas or different action strategies. The fractures line are from now on transversal. They pass inside the right as well inside the left. They already designate a new cleavage. In the political world, the theatricalization of the right-left opposition has the main objective of masking the convergence of camps whose identities have been undone. So this idea of supposedly ideological syncretism that is linked to like the confusion and of the category of right and left in post-Cold War time. And this is an interesting book also published in France by a political scientist, Philippe Courcouf, that has nothing to see with Alain de Benoit and the Nouvelle Droite, no? That the title is The Big Confusion, no? How the extreme right is winning the ideological fight, no? And he explained in this interview with journalist Simon Blin and in his book this, no? That today, he explained, it is the Zemmour de Soral, Alain Soral. Maybe you don't know him. He was a collaborator of Jean-Marie Le Pen, and that left in 2009, 2010 the party, being more on the right of Marine Le Pen, to have an idea. And the Le Pen, who reused the critical tradition of the left, disconnecting it from an emancipatory horizon. Around the world, the neoconservative right, or extreme right if you prefer, has preempted the critical discourse of the left. The extreme right has carried out some semantic hijacking that have allowed an ideological political bricolage, or potpourri, no? If you want, in which each one puts what they want, until Rousseau can dialogue with the ideologue of the extreme right, Soral, in an ancient Greek theater. No, is a metaphor. So, and it's quite clear if we are listening some in the last month of the declaration of the extreme right leaders. Not maybe everywhere, not exactly in the same in each country, but it's like putting a bit of everything, no, inside. And so Courcouf he's talking about a confusing ideological space. He's not state, and the meaning is not that the left and right doesn't exist, but there is this space that is like ideologically confused, no? And the confusion would be the development of rhetorical and ideological interference between the position and issues of the extreme right, the right, moderate left, and radical left. So try to go quickly to the point. I suggest to talk about ideological parasitism, taking in account the first 3 points. So the strategy that some sectors of the extreme right since the 70s they develop, and that nowadays they are quite used, no? In all this kind of party, with obvious differences between them. Secondly, taking in account this idea of the ideological confusionism, and third, the idea of syncretism. Here I don't want to say that left and right they are collaborate, or the far right that is leftist. Absolutely not, no? But it is a discursive strategy that is quite used by them, no? To present themselves as something different. In this ideological confusionism of the post-Cold War era, for one hand, and taking in account the idea that to gain the cultural hegemony, they need to give the cultural battle, and only later have possible for them the political hegemony. So we have this kind of potpourri ideological, And Elchaninov, for example, talks about this idea in the case of Marine Le Pen strategy after 2011, or of semantic hijacking. So like to try to take some symbols, idea, words, or also references. We will see something that I think is very interesting in Italy, in France, in other countries, from the left, or from like liberals, from the liberals. Here first, that is not something new in the last 10 years. Since the beginning, the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s, Jean-Marie Le Pen, Front National, present himself as ni droit ni gauche, nor right, nor neither right nor left. But then we have also something that is peculiar, that is absolute. On the right or Front National, La Liste Antisioniste, founded by a comedian, that is Dieudonné Balambala, the black guy in the middle of the photo, no? That is absolutely ethno-nationalist, xenophobic, anti-Semitic, not only anti-Zionist. This is also using some of these ideas and semantic hijacking in some cases. But here, for example, we have something more. The poster there up is Alain Soral, these guys that he collaborate with Dieudonné during a while, 2011, 12, 13, more or less, in La Liste Antisioniste, that he used this slogan, Gauche du travail et droit des valeurs. Left of the work and right of the values. That is the same slogan that a supposedly Marxist Italian philosopher, Diego Fusaro, that guy, used for his party that was absolutely a failure in Italy in 2005, 6 years ago. Vox Italia, that is not related to Vox Spain, but he used the same idea, the Latin word to give voice to the people in that case. He presents himself like a disciple of Gramsci, Marx, and Althusser, but he collaborates with the Casa Pound, the neo-fascist in Italy of the third millennium, as they present themselves in the magazine of the Casa Pound, and he used this idea of a value of the right, and in this case not idee di sinistra, so left-wing ideas. But then, if we take a look at the other two images are of Casa Pound. So we are talking about guys, a little party, that they are present themselves as neo-fascist. They're not try to, don't say we are not fascist, we are, talking the language of the people, we are defending the common sense. We are explicitly quoting Mussolini or whatever. But at the same time, they use like a figure of Che Guevara, as you can see in that debate that they organized some years ago. Or after the death of Hugo Chavez, they put some poster in the street saying honor to Chavez. So we are not talking about a left-wing movement. We are not talking about something that is populist, supposedly, but we are talking about neo-fascist, in this case, party. But then if we go a bit deep, not only in some poster or slogan, but also in the quote of, in the speeches of some of the most important leaders of the far right today, as for example, Meloni or Le Pen, we can see also this. No? Le Pen in 2011, in the middle of a crisis, he was talking about that to men and women. He was outside a factory and saying, men and women of the left, look what they have done with your hopes. Look what it has become the left, which was supposed to bring progress, support the weakest, defend those who work, who struggle to bring them a brighter future. It has abandoned all, betrayed it. Today it has been corrupted to its core by money and by power. Obviously, it's a populist rhetoric. We know that. But at the same time, Le Pen, together with that guy that was his number 2 until 2007, Florian Philippot, that it was coming by the sovereignist left, Chevènementisme in France, around the beginning of the century. They tried to have this discourse and present themselves also explicitly as what was the Communist Party in the Cold War time, so defending the working class. And then you have, for example, politician in a local level like this guy, Fabian Engelmann, that is since 2014, he published this book in that time, the mayor of a little city in the north of France, an industrial city of 15,000 inhabitants that was until 2014 always governed by the communists and then the socialists, or together, the left, that he, until that moment, he was a militant of the anti-capitalist of Besancenot, then shifted to talking about the threat of the Islamization of France, this kind of discourse, to Front National. And he wrote this book explaining his shift from leftism to patriotism. And he presents, for example, Marine Le Pen as the only one that defends the separation between state and church, the law of 1905 in France, which denounced the trivialization of halal, so the Islamization of France and that stuff, and which proposed concrete solution against globalization, relocation, and unfair competition from foreign workers massively imported by Brussels. But then take a look at this quote. This is Matteo Salvini, that is not leftist at all. And also when he was young, he never be a communist or post-communist or whatever. This is his autobiography published in 2016. It's a quote from the first page. I wrote this book, wrote Salvini, because I hate the indifferent, as Gramsci said, because I think that in these times, obedience is no longer a virtue, as Don Milani wrote. Always in an obstinate direction and contrary, as De André said, always with the heart. Maybe some of these references not so clear outside Italy, but well, the Gramsci one, yes, is like, well, I don't know, Le Pen quoting one of the intellectual founders of the Communist Party of France. Gramsci was one of the founders, no, as you know, of Italian Communist Party. Don Milani was a priest that worked with the poor, related in the late 60s in different cities in Italy. And De André is like the Joan Baez of Italy, so a folk singer, very related, very famous, but with anarchism and the left fighting since the 60s until he's dying in the late 90s. So I want to say you have here, Salvini, that in the first page of his autobiography, when he was looking to be like the leader of the country, 2016, now is a different moment, he quote only this. He not quote something from the right. And that photo is the young Salvini in the 90s. And it's interesting, it's not easy to see, but here you can see that it seems to be like a bit a Sartrean intellectual. He was never an intellectual, Salvini, but apart the symbol of the Northern League, the green one, close there is a pin with the Basque country flag, the independentist flag, if you want, of Basque country, and the Che Guevara. So I want to say this idea, like to try to make confusion on that and try to appropriate some symbols, some references that is usually referred to the left. But maybe you can say, okay, Salvini is peculiar, is a bit, is funny in some way, or is like more provocative than others. But in the case of Meloni, in another way, is similar. This is a quote of Meloni, the first one, Meloni autobiography, published in 2021, where he say, Pasolini, Pierpaolo Pasolini, that was not rightist, wrote a conservative political manifesto. So it's not only to quote, but also to offer a vision of what that intellectual or writer, in the case of Pasolini, related to the left-wing vision of the world, etc., wrote, no? So to present them as a conservative. Pasolini, this photo is from the meeting of the party of 2 years ago, if I'm not wrong, where Pasolini was also put like one of the intellectual reference of Brothers of Italy. That the poor Pasolini, if he would be alive, was like a bit scared of. But also in a discourse in the parliament during the Draghi government, Meloni in the opposition took the begin the speech quoting Bertolt Brecht. We sat on the wrong side because all the other seats were occupied. Obviously, Brecht is not a reference of Meloni, but there is like this interest in quoting using references also from the left. And then you see a video of Meloni when she was young, 2004, if I'm not wrong, when he was elected the leader of the young section of the National Alliance of Gianfranco Fini, so the father party of Brothers of Italy, if you want, that he stated all a song of Francesco Guccini, that is another singer-songwriter, still alive, that is related to the left-wing culture. Guccini as De André was one of the, like Bob Dylan and Joan Baez, no, if you want, in some way. That is, Cyrano de Bergerac is a song of Guccini. But then there is also, if you want, it is a bit not only lefty, but related to this appropriation, the Tolkien. Tolkien is quoted by Meloni a lot of time. Last year in Rome was the Minister of Culture, former because he needed to resign because he had problem with women. Gennaro San Giuliano organized a big exposition related to Tolkien that he was like a present to Giorgia Meloni. Giorgia Meloni, he have a lot of photo quote reading Tolkien. He quote a lot Tolkien. And this is interesting because Tolkien nowadays is appropriated mostly by extreme right, but also the techno-oligarch. It's not only about Meloni. This is related to neo-fascism in Italy, because in the 70s, trying to copy the sectors that were reading in the mid-70s Alain de Benoit and Nouvelle Droit, Marco Tarchi and others of the youth part of neo-fascist Italian social movement in Italy, they organized like this young festival, like copying what the left after Woodstock more or less and the social movement they are doing, and was called Campo Hobbit. Hobbit with the reference of Tolkien. This is a photo of that, one of that meeting in the late 70s. But nowadays, for example, Peter Thiel, Palmer Luckey, or the same G.D. Vance, they have founded company whose name, Palantir is the one more famous of Peter Thiel, Anduril is another, Naria, they are related to figure of, place of Tolkien books. I think it's interesting this. Palmer Luckey is this guy that is not known at all nowadays, but is very important in the Thiel and techno-oligarch network nowadays. And here you see Gennaro San Giuliano, that was the former culture minister in Italy, in the book Meeting of Festival of Turin, that is the most important in Italy. This is last year, with Alain de Benoit. And this young guy with the microphone is Francesco Giubilei, that is like a young intellectual influencer inside Brothers of Italy, very related to all these networks. So another time, the importance of Alain de Benoit and what he stated with the Nouvelle Droit is very present. But try to finishing it like 3 minutes. Also here you have, for example, a quote of Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon is not a leftist, but he say in 2013, so just before the first campaign of Trump, he defined himself as a Leninist. It's a bit like peculiar if you want, no? Lenin want to destroy the state, and that's my goal too. I want to bring everything crashing down and destroy all the today's establishment. But then, and here I finish, there's, for example, this appropriation in some way, or this semantic hijacking, no? And this ideological potpourri is also related to what is important in society in some years, no? Nowadays, for example. So what they are the most important fighting that we have from a progressist point of view? Feminism, no? LGBTQ right, for example, or the fight for the environment. And so the concept of femonationalism was coined by Sarah Farris, a political scientist that works in London, no? As an electoral strategy or tactic whereby a type of nationalist ideology hides behind some postulates of the feminist movement to hide its racism and xenophobic motivation. So in the name of the women's rights, using nationalism to exclude others, usually immigrants or Muslim. And we can see this obviously in the extreme right today. But it is related also to what some scholars explain as the feminization of the faces of the leadership. So we have, compared to the past, more women leading extreme right parties. Marine Le Pen, Giorgia Meloni, Alice Weidel, no? And Alice Weidel, for example, is also lesbian. She declared, she stated that with no problem. No? So this idea, and Meloni, for example, one of these famous slogans is, I'm a woman, I'm a mother, no? I'm Italian, etc. And he stated a lot against the left, me, I'm a woman. You never present a woman as a candidate. So don't explain to me what should be the fight for feminism. And well, there is some quote, but I go faster. In the case of homo-nationalism, it is something, if you want, similar. We have leaders, apart Weidel, that they were or they are inside the extreme right gaze. No, they made this statement, as for example, Pim Fortuyn in the Netherlands that was killed in 2002, or the same Florian Philippot, number 2 of Le Pen, and inside Rassemblement National, there is others leaders. But also, for example, you have this guy that is a Spanish extreme right influencer that is called Infoblogger, that he, for example, made a song in the Vox party 2 years ago that is going back to 1936, so like celebrating the coup d'etat that started the civil war. Declared himself that I'm gay, but I'm not agree with the left, and his position are related to the Weltanschauung of Vox and the far right. But then obviously homonationalism is linked to, no? In Hungary, gays can walk in peace and not in Barcelona or Amsterdam because of fundamentalist immigration. Is a quote of Abascal, leader of Vox. No, so we have both things to use, like the defense of women's rights or LGBTQ rights against migration and with an ethno-nationalist view, but at the same time trying to have some figures inside the party, also in the leadership, that they stated that they are feminist or they are gay or lesbian. And to finish, also this we can see in the so-called green patriotism. Some scholars in the 90s talk about eco-fascism. And this is interesting. Here you see the case of Le Pen. Inside the party, there is a group that is called New Ecology for patriotic ecology. I don't know what is exactly patriotic ecology compared with ecology that is not patriotic, but in any case, the quote of Le Pen, wrote by an intellectual that was coming from the Nouvelle Droit of de Benoit, explained this. The fight for national sovereignty is a fight for diversity of people, agriculture, and civilization. The fight for French identity is a fight to keep our gardens, mountains, flowers, birds, butterflies. It's a fight for a fair and sustainable economy. The fight for the borders is a fight that respects each nation. To defend the national identity of France means to affirm our preference for a culture rich in history and national legend, and for the symbols which make the community of French people. So, to finish, is another saprofagous organism, the far right, as fascism, according to Mosse, quote, it was in the 20s and the 30s. I think yes, in the sense, no, of the capacity to appropriate words and concepts associated with the left and the progressists or liberals in the States that mark the public debate. And so the word freedom, no, we just talked about before, is evident everywhere. No? In Austria or in the Netherlands, the far-right parties, they are using in the name the concept of freedom. But in the case of Javier Milei, is explicit too. You can see also this gadget that they are nowadays in Argentina with, like a long life to freedom, no? Or his slogan. But also the Gramscism of Alain de Benoit and this goal to have the cultural hegemony is a Gramsci, obviously, that is neutralized politically, as Francesco Germinario explained some years ago. So it's only a tactical, an instrumental resource. But it's true also then that the Benoit is not like the old man that he's moving all the extreme right today all over the world, is obvious. But the new extreme right, they have metabolized, if you want, the ideas from the Nouvelle Droite, and also the Nazbol galaxy, the first image that we saw of the Limonov and Dugin party. And what is the goal? To achieve a common meaning that was previously prohibited. So the mainstreamization of the idea could finally gain election and be in power. Sorry for being a bit late, and thank you.
Thank you very much. With this final elaboration with feminism, LGBTQI, and eco, it's really, saprofagos does really come out more clear. I'm wondering if there are perhaps any questions in the audience for our fellow. There's one question there.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much for this fascinating. Unfortunately, it's so actual that a lot of questions come to mind. But I have one question here, maybe two. One is this new. What is new about this? And very different kind of, as you said, different traditions, and they somehow suck it up and revert it. But and one question: this kind of in the classical fascism, if I can say that, the state had a role. It had a role, and it was a lot about corporatism. It was all about trying to somehow discipline or abolish even capitalism in some kind of new organic order, of course without losing the good things that are thought is good about capitalism. This is, and we know a lot about here because also it mixed a lot with Catholic corporatalism and so on, and there was a debate on another kind of social democratic view of the world, progressivism, which also wanted to somehow this kind of control capitalist development. For example, if you go to the Roosevelt New Deal and stuff like that. But now we see something different, and maybe it's just a thought that this new right, it's against the state, as you said. It's also pro-capitalism, and it's also very pro to destroy the state. Not just the state is not important, but the state is these fantasies that the state will not exist, and of course this is the best now viewed by ideology and actions of Musk. We can see that as we speak, the ideology in action, the political action. So how does this relate? Maybe this thought, because before in classical fascism, let's say this kind of corporatism, now completely open, diverse, the different idea, but still trying to bind this kind of together. And what does it left? How can you be? I always ask myself, if you are for the borders, it's a logical question, and close the borders, but you're destroying the state. It's something that it's. I suppose this would be for the classical fascist inconceivable. Do you have any comment about that? It's a very wild ideas that I'm sorry, I couldn't elaborate it more precisely, but it's they are too contemporary. Yes.
Yeah, sure. Or you want to take more? Yeah. Well, no, thank you. It's, I think, a very interesting point. Well, here I think first, as also, for example, Kasmuder or others expert on far right, radical right, populism, etc., stated, and I think it's quite true. The economic position in the manifesto or statement until the 90s, not in the government, of the radical far right was changing according to the context. So in the 80s, they were explicitly, most of them, neoliberal. Le Pen, Haider, Bossi, or whatever. After the crisis of 2008, 2010, they introduced some discourse defending working class against globalization, like Marine Le Pen stated that we saw before. So why I say this? Well, and at the end, I agree with you that they are neoliberal. They could have more interesting in some social policies in some moments related to how the perception of people they are changing about neoliberalism, about economy, or the role of the state, but they are neoliberal. And the case in which we had this new extreme right in the government, from Hungary to El Salvador, or Poland with Law and Justice, they didn't change at all the neoliberal model. They could make some policies related to some section of the population to have their consensus, nothing more. Okay, saying that, I think that maybe now we are in a really turning point after the Trump victory, related to not only the power of this techno oligarch, that also is that, but is also related to a new kind of neoliberalism. I want to say, my opinion, but it's I want to say we are living now, so let's see in 6 months or 2 years and talk about that another time. But my perception is that neoliberalism, as we know since the 80s until the crisis, until the last years, is dead. That kind of neoliberalism. Nowadays, we are entering probably in a new kind of neoliberalism, 4.0, I don't know, that is not only more radical in the economic policies that they defend, but also that accept an authoritarian point of view about democracy. So that say democracy is not useful, democracy is a failure. And that let's see how could find a new balance between globalization and protectionism. Let's see. But I think we are in this point that something is changing, and very quickly. Second point, and related to that, I don't think that this far right is against the state. The point is that because they are neoliberal, they are for a strong state, but not related to control economy, or control some part of the economy in a here we can do also another parallelism with the 30s, 20s and 30s, about a new kind of authoritarian compromise with the elite, that are economical elite, but also political elite, the so-called center right that doesn't exist anymore, and is radicalized and collaborate with the extreme right. So in the frame of this new kind of authoritarian compromise, if it's, I'm not sure of that, it's an option, something that I perceived in the last month. I'm thinking, for example, of the figure of Milei, that 1 year ago was considered like a funny guy, completely crazy. Nowadays they say, no, Argentina is working good. No, he could, yeah. So is that so? A strong state, but strong on security, borders, against rights of people, criminalization of protest, demonstration, etc. So this kind of strong state, but then not in the case like corporativism to rule the economy, but the economy is given to the oligarchs that they do what they want there with an agreement. So I think that maybe is that, but taking in account what I say at the beginning, that finally for this kind of party, economy is not something crucial in their discourse and their proposal. They are moving according to the context. So if now the context is really going to like a new kind of neoliberal agreement, neoliberal 4.0 agreement, they move also them. And so like the social policies that Marine Le Pen defend no, 10 years ago during the crisis, maybe will be another kind of statement of Marine Le Pen also in France. That is a peculiar case because the welfare state is something very important for all the parties, but also them there could be important. Think, for example, that in Argentina, paleolibertarianism 5 years ago didn't exist. Nobody was paleolibertarian, only Milei, and since in that moment only since 5 years, there was nobody in that moment. There was no party, was like leader association with 10 people that make some conference about Murray Rothbard. There was no tradition about that. So I think that is interesting to think about that because can offer us the vision of what could be maybe in the future the transformation of the far right. I don't know if I answered to you.
You answered perfectly because my question was also was not very direct and I was not expecting precise answer. It would be odd if we would answer really precise.
Any other questions, perhaps?
I can. It should be like a comment or maybe direct question if you know the answer. It would be perfect. That if you see some connection, you mentioned the Tolkien references and the using of the literature. Maybe it's based on the book. I believe there was an Australian professor, Robert Stewart, and his work about the racism and how Tolkien was actually a racist because he brings some of these spheres of the black is bad, the Mordor and all the ones, and maybe there was a great outrage about the using Tolkien as a racist, and maybe for some people that you mentioned that they were using based on his book maybe, or the big outrage that they can hide behind these ideas that maybe are there or maybe aren't.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Well, I don't know related to the techno right nowadays in the States, Peter Thiel, that guy. I don't know if they read this book and was like one of the reason. But in the case of Italian neo-fascism and also nowadays Brothers of Italy, and what usually you can find about that is not related to that, was not related to racism. They don't know if they knew this book, etc., etc. But it was not the interpretation of Tolkien that allowed them to use it, or was like the reason why they choose Tolkien and use it. It's more related to like the fantasy of another dimension, and think how neo-fascism how neo-fascists perceived themselves in the 60s or 70s in Europe. So after 1945, the defeat of fascism, we are like something excluded. So it's like also this fantasy world is related to like making some fight in another dimension where they could be accepting and living like in an utopia, if you want. Maybe I didn't explain very well, but I think is that point. For example, think that another reference in the case of Italy, but I think is quite related to this of Tolkien, is Michael Ende, most famous book that is I don't know in English, la storia infinita, the infinite story,
And,
Never ending.
never ending,
I think it's never ending story.
something like that. That is another kind of fantasy, no, literature case. And the name of the party, the name of the meeting, annual meeting of the party, well, of the young section of the party with National Alliance when Meloni was in charge in that time, is Atreyu. And Atreyu is a name coming from Michael Ende book, because he fight against the nothing, no? And so it's like a metaphor for them. We are fighting against the nothing because we have values, we have an idea, we have a vision of the world. So it's this, no? And Atreyu nowadays is also continue to be the name, is in this September or December, I don't remember, October, of the Brothers of Italy party, where Elon Musk, Viktor Orban, Steve Bannon, Santiago Abascal, Javier Milei, they went also together with a lot of other less known people, no? And this now is very big because the party is big and is ruling the country. So what I want to say with that is another kind of reference, and Meloni quoted also in his autobiography, Michael Ende, and this, I think is more related to that in the case of Italian neo-fascism and nowadays, Brothers of Italy, more related to the fantasy, to that. But I think it's something interesting to work. In the case of Thiel and that guy, really, I have no clear idea. It's difficult to find information about that. Maybe in the next few months there will be something more, because a lot of people now are interested in the techno bros, no?
Any other questions? I mean, I do have a comment, just in the context of how we start with the rhetoric and the pop culture references, and it all seems very, while focusing on appropriating different terms, it is actually the effect, the metabolic process is to redefine, not to, you know what I mean? It's not rhetoric, it's politically neutralizing and redefining norms and common sense in the end, and establishing
Absolutely,
a
yes.
new kind of common sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is the process that we're stuck in now. This is why it's difficult to talk about it, because the effects of it will be probably obvious after 30 years, when ecology will mean something completely different from what it means now. Like what you said, no? Like it's going to be perhaps more related to national borders in very strange ways. So it's not rhetorical, it's more like tactical.
It's both things, I think, now. No, I'm completely agree with you. Is this kind of appropriation that allow them to present themselves as something different, for one hand, if you want populism, what we understand as populism in this way, but then is also that, related more to feminism, to LGBTQ rights, to environmental issue, is related to that, to give another meaning to that. And so we usually talk about greenwashing, pinkwashing, etc. This idea help us to understand what they are doing, but I think it's something more. It's not only a simple greenwashing, but I think is related to. Finally, I think it's crucial to go back to read the Nouvelle Droit and Alain de Benoit text and what he proposed, because there are some people that say, well, you are really focused, not only me, I want to say people, on de Benoit, but de Benoit was pagan, was not Catholic. He was anti-Western, he was pro-European. And so, for example, I don't know, like 10 years ago, an Eurosceptic extreme right party that was pro-Catholic say, well, nothing to do with de Benoit. But it's not true, because one point is the idea of de Benoit in some religion or Americanization of the life, or etc., etc. But then is the strategy that he proposed. And the strategy is related to that. It's not only the metapolitics to like enter in the university or in the media to spread your ideas. That is also that. And then with social networks and the internet is faster and easier. But it's also to give another meaning to concept that they are in the public debate. And so the case of feminism or environmentalism is that.
Yeah, case in point. We do have someone online, so I will read the whole. It's a comment and a question. Greetings from Jana Javornik. She's a multidisciplinary social scientist, and so she loves the presentation and says thank you. So I find your journey through the conceptualization of Europe's far right highly timely. I recently scanned UK media and find their framing of far right highly problematic. They're categorized variously as far right, national conservative, radical right, anti-Islam, nativist, Eurosceptic. Also routinely used are extreme right, populist, alt-right, neo-fascist, anti-immigration, nationalist, authoritarian, and assorted combinations of the above. The issue I have with this is that how societal issues are framed in media has a profound impact on public attitudes, collective action, and public policy. The media can affect political demand by setting the agenda on or framing key issues such as immigration and crime, helping legitimize a political space in which the radical right can thrive. That notwithstanding, the way the media relate to radical right-wing actors remains a less studied area in the literature on the radical right. In that respect, The Populists, an international project by 100 plus political scientists from 30 plus countries that classifies Europe's political parties and their changing ideologies, seems to be useful. So her big question, Jana's question, is how could we in academia help shape this public framing to be less static and more research informed? She would appreciate your initial thoughts.
Well, thank you very much for your question, and I completely agree about the importance of the media to set the agenda. And the confusion that we have in the using of concept, and that seems to be like synonymous, but finally they are not. And what is really interesting for me, one of the concepts that he put in the comment in the question is national conservatism. That is something now quite important, because now there is this think tank, the Edmund Burke Foundation, created by Yoram Hazony, a philosopher from Israel, but very related to the Republican in the States, and nowadays also more closer to Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, all that world of Trumpism. And he he made a statement of principle that is called national conservatism, that was signed by different leaders and members of extreme right parties, with his foundation he organized different NatCon meeting in Brussels, in London, in the States, in Rome, in the last years. And for me, the concept of national conservatism that, for example, also Meloni we are national conservative, is like a way to mask their own ideology. Is at the same time national conservatism a way to try to have a strong alliance with the old conservatives, so the mainstream right, and both to present themselves as not so radical. So we are not extreme right, we are conservative nationalist. So it's something acceptable if you think, okay, I'm not agree with you, but you are. But I think so. This is interesting. But going back to the question, is not easy to answer to this question. I think is one of the $1 million question that we have nowadays, and we should, I think more about that. The point is that it's not easy to say to the media what they should use. I think in any case, as scholars, if we work in this field, it's important to be proactive and not only, I want to say that it's crucial, publish a paper in an academic journal, no, but also to try to be present in the public debate, in the in the mainstream media, to try to help them if they wanna to have more clear ideas about what we are talking about, which concept we should use. No, obviously it's not possible to change things in 1 year or in 6 months, but I think it's important from the academia to be proactive. No, I think was that the question more or less, and yeah, I completely agree with what he wrote. She wrote.
She. If the media is not owned by.
Well, obviously, Elon Musk, no?
Yeah. Okay, so if there are no other questions, I'm just checking if there are, perhaps by any chance. No. I would like to thank everybody. There's coffee waiting for us and continuation of the conversation. But I would also like to invite everyone to the next lecture. On the 19th of February, Johan Sakharov will elaborate on the processes of economic to political sovereignty, inventing self-management in late Soviet Estonia, 1987 until 1989. Thank you very much. Thank you for the questions on Zoom, everyone who was here, and thank you.
Thank you very much.